You. Fuck you.
You fucking won't.
Hello, ladies and birds. This is the Mammy Gammy movie review bullshit extravaganza. My name is Mammy. This is Gammy, aka I'm Rob McNeil, and then this is Joshua Bentley. We're going to review movies and stuff, but before we do that, we're going to say our top 10 movies of all time. That way you have a little bit of context for our movie taste. Maybe it's similar to yours, maybe it's not at all. One of my honorable mentions is Sing Street, because that movie I enjoyed a lot more than I really expected to. I think that plays into it a lot, is your expectations going into a movie. I didn't expect to like it, or I didn't know what to expect from it. And it really just kind of blew me away, just not just with the story, but the songs were pretty amazing too. Birdman is another one of my honorable mentions that, I don't really even know where to start with that, because it's a great drama. It's got some humor thrown in. The acting is impeccable. Everything being made to look like one take. I really can't say enough about that. Children of Men is another one of mine. It's really just, the dystopia. It's just really up my alley. Clive Owen's also a great actor too. He's one of my favorites. But and I feel like I have to also include Drive as a part of one of my honorable mentions. The Grand Budapest Hotel. The Dark Knight, Casablanca, but I won't go on too much, so you go ahead with yours.
Okay. All good choices for honorable mentions. I think my first honorable mention I'd have to throw in there would be La La Land. Really stood out as a musical that appreciates story as much as the musicality and theatricality behind the story. Had pretty high expectations going into that movie just because of the cast and Damien Chazelle being a pretty acclaimed director.
Absolutely.
Coming off of that immense picture of Whiplash from 2014, 2015?
14, yeah.
14. So yeah, that's a great movie. I find it has pretty decent rewatchability, even though you know how the story ends and how the romantic elements of the stories play out. I just really love the cinematography, the choreography, the score, the soundtrack. Everything about that movie flows really well. And it's just a really feel-good story about people following their passions. Another honorable mention I'd have to throw in there would probably be Sicario. Great neo-western kind of crime thriller directed by Denis Villeneuve. Excellent score, excellent story, excellent pacing. What I really like about this movie is its focus on not so much the characters, but the ambiguity in character, and how, this movie focuses on the kind of gray areas that surround the FBI, the CIA, the government, and drug trafficking that happens throughout the Mexico-United States border and all that. Really strong performances out of the three leads, Emily Blunt, Benicio del Toro, and Josh Brolin. Just an excellent movie from start to finish. And then my last honorable mention would probably have to be The Grand Budapest Hotel, like you mentioned. I think it's Wes Anderson's most cohesive and most fleshed out work, and I also believe it's probably his most indicative of his style. Not only in the color palette, but also the characterization, the writing, the dialogue. It all is very Wes Anderson in every aspect, and so I really love that.
Completely agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, it plays out. It's a pretty funny movie at times, but also kind of grim and kind of sad at times, but also has a lot of character and a lot of charm. So
It can get serious, and I think even more so than his other films.
Yeah.
Moonrise Kingdom was, for the most part, it's very lighthearted throughout, but Budapest gets serious at certain times, but it doesn't feel jarring at all.
Yeah, and
But
what I love about those two movies is they're both, in a sense, coming-of-age stories.
right.
Moonrise Kingdom focuses more on, I think, the childish and immature elements of growing up, and then the Grand Budapest Hotel is the other side of the coin, where it's more of a glimpse into the maturity and I guess, evolution of the character of Zero, from a kind of different standpoint. So yeah, I really love those two movies.
Oh, Budapest has your Bay in it too, so I mean, how could you leave
Oh
that off of
yeah,
there?
Saoirse Ronan's great in
Serge
it.
Sours, yeah.
Ray Fiennes, absolutely hilarious. Wasn't really expecting him to be such a comedic
Oh,
powerhouse.
he's
The
fantastic in it.
dude delivers some of the best lines in that movie. It's
Absolutely, he does the line about Penny Dreadful, so you can't be a candy ass. Oh my
yeah,
god, I absolutely love
Pinky
that line.
Bandinsky. Oh man,
It's a
but yeah.
beautiful film
Oh,
overall, but
I love it. I haven't seen it in a while, so I'll have to go back and rewatch it. I think pretty soon here.
it breaks my heart to leave it off of my top 10, but there's just so many great films out there. It's really hard to condense it to just 10. I mean, even 100 for that matter.
Yeah.
Start off with my number 10, and also before we do that, though, to kind of go back to Sicario being your honorable mention. You guys will come to find out we are obsessed with Denis Villeneuve. We love him. He's one of the best directors of our time.
The man
and that's
is
really not an
probably
opinion.
the
That's a
most
fact.
consistent director of the past decade, I would say.
Absolutely. So my number 10, and then also this kind of relates back to Sicario as well. My number 10 is Wind River. It's the third feature film by Taylor Sheridan. It's his third feature script, rather, but it's his first, it's his directorial debut, Wind River. It's starring Jeremy Renner and Elizabeth Olsen. It's really beautiful in its cinematography. Really, it's not flashy or over the top, but it's more subdued. But it's still very. It gives you that sense of being alone out in the wilderness, and it's cold, and everybody seems. It's really kind of drab and depressing, but it's also very beautiful in its own way. I know you like the film as well, Josh.
Yeah, yeah. I think Taylor Sheridan really has a talent for crafting neo-western and crime thriller stories. Sicario, Wind River, and Hell or High Water being his three films that he's written, all very acclaimed and very well respected. And I sure did love Wind River too, not only because of its large scope in the sense of this conflict and this divide within the Indian community and the governmental aspects of the reservation,
Right.
but also how he narrowed it down to just pretty much Jeremy Renner's character and Elizabeth Olsen's character and how they have to overcome adversity through this harsh landscape.
Absolutely. And it's slow to start, which I think puts some people off, but I didn't feel it at all.
Yeah, I think with this movie, Sheridan really kind of drew me in with the pacing. I love that about Sicario, and I felt a little jarred while watching Hell or High Water at times because of the pacing, but I think here he returns to form and is really able to find a pace that works for him. And that might have been because he's also the director on this film, so he had that, I guess, bonus of being the writer and director, but couldn't be more happy that it worked out for him this time around.
Yeah, you felt more of his control here, and I think he's definitely a solid director, if not a great director. I mean, especially with that being his debut. But yeah, I took no issue with the pacing, and once it all builds up to something, and without giving anything away, it's one of the most compelling scenes I've seen in recent memory.
Feels very real, very sincere.
It is, absolutely, and it's also, I think, in my own personal opinion, I think it's his most character-driven story.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think that there were very strong characters with Renner and Olsen's characters, and they turn in very powerful performances. I mean, they deserve recognition for it. I don't think they're going to get it, but I really felt that it was the best I've seen Renner and Olsen easily for both of them. So I really commend Sheridan, not the Weinstein Company at all, but I do absolutely commend Sheridan and Olsen and Renner, and everyone else is great in it as well. But they're kind of overshadowed by their performances. They really take the lead, and they're front and center, for pretty much the whole time. So they carry the movie very well. What's your number 10, Gammy?
So before I talk about my number 10, I think it's important to point out the fact that I think Wind River would for sure be up for at least Best Original Screenplay, maybe Best Picture. I'm sure Jeremy and Elizabeth would be up for some lead actor and actress nods,
I hope
not
you're right.
for its association with the Weinstein Company. I think that's really hurting its status right now.
Yeah,
With all of that controversy going on.
I think you're right.
I think this movie came out just during the wrong time, was produced by the wrong company. So yeah, it's kind of a shame, but
Sheridan had a
definitely-
hard time getting a production company, and I think he kind of had to settle there. Weinstein
Yeah.
Company was going to drop him, but they picked him back up, which I thought was interesting. But
Yeah.
it's a very competitive category. Both are. So since even if the whole Weinstein Company scandal notwithstanding, I still think they may not have made it. But like I said, it's a very, very competitive category for screenplay this year. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But go
Yeah.
ahead with your number 10, Josh. Let's hear it.
So my number 10 is Mad Max Fury Road. I don't know. There's so much to say about this movie, from a story aspect to a technical aspect to a directorial aspect. This movie really blew me away in a way that I wasn't really expecting. Because when you hear Mad Max, you think of the original film starring Mel Gibson and how they've kind of been morphed and evolved into these cult action thriller movies, which really didn't have a lot of story behind it. And so when I saw this in theaters, I wasn't really expecting much. But after leaving it, I think George Miller did a fantastic job of reinvigorating the series and reinvigorating the characters, and really made a blood-pumping, an electric, a thrilling ride that is Mad Max from beginning to end. There's not a break. There's not a gap in action. For good reason too. There's a lot to digest in this movie. Yeah, that's all I really can say about this. I think it's better served to see the movie and experience it for yourself. Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, all great actors, all great characters that they bring to the table. But I think it's really George Miller's direction and his vision for this movie that really carried the film.
So kind of going back to Hell or High Water, that's one that you and I disagree on, and then this is another one. I think Mad Max Fury Road is one of the best, if not the best, action movies to come out in the past decade, maybe even longer. But to me, I didn't really care for the story, and I kind of felt it was a little bit shoehorned in. We're kind of expected to rally behind Max because of these random visions that he's having, and it didn't really work for me. But I think that the action was very compelling, and it's all very well done because it's all authentic. There was very little CGI, if any at all, and there were, very realistic stunts. There were real explosions. I think that's absolutely insane to do. So I respect the film for its production value, and absolutely George Miller's direction is fantastic, but I just didn't think that there was much in the way of a story. But I think that for an action movie, it definitely soars above the rest.
For sure.
Now, I will continue with my number 1 here, or number 9. I don't know why I said that. So number 9 is Prisoners for me, and Prisoners is another film directed by Denis Villeneuve. Again, I can't say enough about him as a director. He not only does he choose great scripts, but he elevates them with his direction. He can really, he can squeeze some powerful performances out of actors, and it's very impressive what he does. But with Prisoners, it's not only my favorite mystery film, but it also works as an intense thriller and drama. Hugh Jackman turns in, which I think is his best performance before Logan. So, and then Jake Gyllenhaal, who plays Detective Loki, he also turns in a great performance. I think Jake G is pretty much great in everything that he's in. Um, and even the supporting actors that have a little bit smaller roles, they're all great. But it's it gives you clues to who the actual kidnapper is and everything, and I never picked up on it my first time. I was absolutely blown away by the twist, and I absolutely love the ending. I think that it's pretty ambiguous. Arguably, it's not, but I think it is, and I think I just especially love ambiguous endings because it kind of leaves you to decide what you think happened. And most people, I think, would argue that it would end up in a certain way, but I think it's made to be ambiguous, and I appreciated it for that.
For sure. Yeah, that's a great film. Another great story. Um, Great characters. Yeah, really strong number 9 pick.
Thank you, sir. What's your number 9 game?
So my number 9 is The Incredibles out of Disney Pixar, directed by Brad Bird. Um, this is probably my favorite superhero movie of all time. It's not realistic and gritty like The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises. It's not super theatrical and you know grand in scope like the Avengers, but that's what I love about it. It's more of a grounded, sort of familial storyline that is, got a lot of heart to it.
Sure.
The voice acting performances are all strong, but what I really love is just the animation quality, the really invigorating and captivating story, and kind of the take on superheroes. We always get those superheroes and superhero movies where they're kind of fabled and worshipped as gods, and they're people that the community can look up to, and they're kind of hailed in such a way. But in this one, the story is actually the superheroes are in exile because they've been cast out by society, and it's illegal to demonstrate your powers. And this is kind of the comeback and how this family has to struggle with that decision to come out again as superheroes. And that's what I really love about this movie. It's kind of a different take.
Yeah, it's very grounded, and it's humble in its presentation, and that's why I liked the film as well. It's been a very long time since I've seen it. I saw it in my childhood, so I really don't remember a whole ton about it, except that I liked it. I really want to revisit it. I think that it's a very fun, but also, it's heartwarming, and it's not just a kids' film. Like you were saying, it's really anyone can enjoy it, and I think that's kind of across the board for most Disney Pixar films, but I think that one especially, it's not just meant for kids. Adults can enjoy it in the same way.
Yeah, and I love the world building that they did for this too. That kind of nostalgic '50s, post-war America, and the soundtrack too, with all that jazz and all that, just kind of gives you that nostalgic, really raw origin of the superhero kind of feel, which is really cool.
Definitely. So my number 8, and I think this is on your list as well, but my number 8 here is Manchester by the Sea. This film absolutely blew me away. It was another one of those that was kind of under the radar. Definitely at first. I think it flew in under a lot of people's radars until, of course, the Oscars rolled around. But Casey Affleck's performance was really one for the ages. I think that he absolutely knocked this role out of the park. Michelle Williams was not in it very long, but in her scenes that she was in, she was on point. Kenneth Lonergan's writing and direction is impeccable. It's a very sad and depressing story, but they also mix in some humor, so there's a little bit of comic relief, to kind of offset the dark and depressing subject matter. But Manchester by the Sea is incredibly powerful. It could honestly be higher on my list, but it's very hard, I think, with how many great films are out there. But to me, it was the best film of 2016, and it's one of the greatest of all time, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I won't say too much about it since it's a little further up on mine, so I'll talk about it later. But
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
love that movie. Absolutely love it. So my number 8 is Arrival by Denis Villeneuve. Um, I really love this take on realistic science fiction. Science fiction is probably my favorite film genre overall. And so, in the last couple of decades, you get these really, really theatrical and really over the top kind of approaches to sci-fi, with like movies like Alien, movies like Blade Runner and all that. And it's always based on conflict and usually war. But then this movie, it involves war and it involves conflict, but it doesn't approach it from an army standpoint, a violence standpoint. It approaches it from the perspective of Amy Adams' character, who is a professor of linguistics, and then Jeremy Renner's supporting character, who is a theoretical physicist, I believe, in the movie. And it's how they are able to make contact with these aliens and solve this conflict through nonviolent means, focusing more on humanity and connecting with these creatures and using language and using science and using love to be compassionate and form a bond. And yeah, I mean, Denis, once again, great directorial aspects, great score, great cinematography. The CGI is really well utilized. I think they could have gone really over the top with the aliens' cosmetics and form. And it is over the top in the sense that it's not your conventional alien. It's not like a Martian you see on like those classic, 50s, 60s posters and all that. They're more of a squid-like presence and a more of a squid-like form. But yeah, really great. I love the use of language too in this movie. Not only English, but how the aliens have their own non-linear language that they use, and how that is used heavily in the film as a means to solution.
Definitely, and Denis is really establishing himself as a very expert, sci-fi director. He, not only with Arrival, but of course the next year with Blade Runner 2049, and then
Yeah.
the year following, he's supposed to be doing Dune. So he's very he's incredibly talented. He's taken on the drama genre and thriller and mystery. I think he incorporates mystery in pretty much every one of his films, but
Yeah.
he definitely knocked it out of the park with Arrival. I agree with you. Arrival is a very it's subtle. It's more subdued than his others, but
Oh yeah.
it's very powerful and emotional. It's a more of an emotional and communicative take on sci-fi, kind of like you were saying. It didn't go the route of action, which I think some people may have been put off by. I think the marketing was almost suggesting that shit would get real and pop off, and a bunch of action would ensue. But I really liked the direction he took with it, and it ended up giving us one of the best, most intelligent sci-fi films in recent memory, and Amy Adams turns in, I think, the best performance she's ever had.
Yeah, she was absolutely snubbed at the Oscars for not even getting nominated for Best Actor and a actress in a leading role.
And yeah, and you can even go back to Nocturnal Animals, because I think a lot of people have said that those two films were pulling votes apart from each other, and
Yeah.
I think that hurt her, which to me is incredibly ironic, that having two fantastic roles will end up hurting you.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-boggling, but
Yeah. It's
it's
crazy.
the way it goes sometimes, I guess. But yes, I completely agree. She was the biggest snub of last year. But I look forward to everything that Denis does, and Amy Adams for that matter.
For sure.
So my number 7 film, and this is an interesting one, because you didn't like it on your initial viewing, but then when I urged you to watch it again, I think you said
Oh yeah.
you liked it a lot better the second
Is this
time
Her?
around. It is Her, yes.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think Her is, in my opinion, a perfect blend of romance and sci-fi. It came at an interesting point in my life, which I think is why it affected me so much, and it really hit home with me as well. It kind of explores the nature of relationships and loneliness and going through breakup, and I think it does that very well. I think the writing is beautiful. Joaquin Phoenix has another fantastic performance. It might be his best, if not at the very least one of his best. Again, Amy Adams is in this as well. Of course, she's
Oh yeah.
great in her role. But it's not just a romantic comedy. It's more of a drama actually, and then it's very intelligent too with its incorporation of sci-fi. He's dating a some sort of operating system, and I think it kind of tells a future, a not so distant future, and we could already be there right now. And I think Spike Jonze, he also wrote this. I think he directed it as well, but his writing was absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, he
and
did.
I remember when I first watched it, I said, this better have won awards for writing, and lo and behold, I think it won Best Screenplay for that year at the Oscars, so, and well-deserved, I believe.
Yeah, this is another really realistic and honest approach to sci-fi, which is a genre that can easily become over-convoluted and really ambiguous, but this is really focused and precise in its approach, and I really like that. Joaquin Phoenix, great. That's what you expect from him. He's a very talented actor. I think really underappreciated nowadays.
Oh, definitely.
He's not in as many movies as he was in the early 2000s, not as frequently at least, but he's still very talented. Scarlett Johansson nails that role of the operating system.
Yeah, she
I
does.
believe they had somebody else cast as the operating system, and Scarlett had to come in at last minute and record all of her lines, and she handled that beautifully. So yeah,
I never
great
knew
pick.
that part of it. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
But
I think I remember hearing that. That could be incorrect, but I think they had some actors billed for the voice of the operating system, and then for some reason cut her out, and Scarlett took over and kind of did it all in a last minute
that's
stretch.
very interesting.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult role to play, to, pull off, because you have to sell everything with inflections in your voice and things like that. I can't imagine having to try to, read words on the page emotionally when you're not really even going to be there. You're just speaking into a microphone. That's got to be a very difficult performance to do. And you're right, she nailed it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay,
So what's your 7?
My number 7 is Whiplash. Damien Chazelle's amazing, stunning, violent, almost disturbing approach to jazz music and the culture behind music and the culture behind music conservatories and growing up. Just a really brutal look at this kid named Andrew and his yearning for the attention and praise and acceptance of his band director, starring J.K. Simmons, Miles Teller, who are the two pretty much sole characters in this movie. There's that, but it's mostly focused on this constant battle between Andrew and his band director. So yeah, I mean, this is another one of those movies where it just gets your blood pumping, and I've never been on the edge of my seat so much as watching this movie, never knowing what's going to happen next, with how volatile and vitriolic J.K. Simmons' character can be. You never really know what he's going to do. Is he going to, break Andrew's neck, or is he going to give him one more shot at first chair on drums? So, I don't know. This is a crazy movie from start to finish. You gotta give it a chance. I think even if you don't like jazz, it's a great movie.
Oh, definitely. And hats off to Chazelle. I think he absolutely nails it. It's funny that you said that Whiplash is your number 7, because that's my number 6. And there's really not much more that I can say about it than you already did, except that this is where kind of the expectations plays in, because I'd only heard of Whiplash in passing, and I watched this film on a very small TV. We were on our way back from a track meet. We watched it on the bus, and even watching it on such a small screen, it absolutely blew me away. It's intense. It's gripping. It's J.K. Simmons is absolutely horrifying and phenomenal in his role.
He's disturbingly, disturbingly, like, oh man, he's crazy in this movie.
He definitely is, and Chazelle, I don't know where he got those insults from, but man, he incorporates that so well
Yeah.
into his screenplay, and it's essentially a masterpiece. I mean, I've never seen. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, ending to a movie I've ever seen in my life.
I would have to agree.
It's got to be up there if it's not my favorite. But man, it's compelling from start to finish, and I can't say enough about it. You know, not more than you already have. So that's my number 6.
Okay, so my number 6 is "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" by the Coen Brothers. Um, I've seen this movie so many times, and every time it sucks me in. Um, I love the Coen Brothers and their entire, filmography and all that. They have a really good talent of crafting these amazingly invigorating and almost addicting stories that you can never get enough of. And I think "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" highlights that talent at its very best. Um, it's essentially an adaptation on Homer's The Odyssey set in the Deep South during the Great Depression, following 3 ex-cons as they search for this treasure in the Deep South, and how they meet all these different characters and figures, and how adversity approaches them and how they overcome it. And it's just a great story, but also just a great um, visual piece too. The use of color is really interesting on this movie. They kind of went the route of Saving Private Ryan and what Steven Spielberg did with that movie, where they essentially desaturated the film to make the color a lot more pale, a lot more washed out, to give it kind of this dreary, almost depressed feel, which is fitting for its setting in the Great Depression in the Deep South. Um, so yeah, every aspect of this film I absolutely adore. The characters, the story, the cinematography, but also the soundtrack to it. A lot of great folk songs used in this movie. A lot of great, kind of honky-tonk bluegrass kind of music, which is really fun to see. And it's honestly my favorite George Clooney performance. John Turturro is excellent in this. Tim Blake Nelson is amazing. John Goodman is absolutely disturbing. Holly Hunter's great. This is a great movie.
It is. It's a fantastic film, and the fact that you mentioned the Coen brothers, I do know how much you love them. They're hit or miss for me, but I think when they do hit, they really, really hit, because
Yeah.
they are masterful filmmakers in their own right, and I do absolutely love that movie. It really kind of shaped my childhood because we watched it a lot growing up. It was one of those family movies where every time it's on
Yeah.
TV you turn it on. But
It's
yeah,
so quotable. It's so funny.
it is
It's
incredibly
so
quotable,
biting.
and it has the patented Coen brothers humor in it, which I
Oh
think
yeah.
may not always work for some people, but it really it's impeccable in that film, and they they really know how to direct actors and make them quirky, because Coen
Yeah.
brothers characters are always just they're eccentric and out there,
For
and it
sure.
always works because that's one of the keys to making a great film, is having memorable characters, and they do a really good job with that.
Yeah, they excellent writers, both of them. Really great characterization. That's one of their greatest talents, I think.
It is, and it's one of their best films, because I think it's one of their most perfect blend of comedy, and it does get serious at times when it needs to, and it never feels jarring in that regard. And then, like you were saying, the bluegrass music is it's phenomenal. It's great. I loved it. A Man of Constant Sorrow, of course, that's a
Oh
hit.
yeah.
I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who doesn't know that song. But yeah, that's a great pick. My number 5, and we kind of mentioned this before. This is one that you're not too keen on, but Hell or High Water is my number 5. Um,
Nice.
how it hits home for me because it's about two brothers who start robbing banks, and you figure out why later on. And I think that was a great twist on the heist thriller genre. But for me, the fact that this film is so straightforward and it's subtle, it's not overcomplicated. It's a very simple premise, but I think Sheridan just did a phenomenal job, and I think he captured the the feel of the South, more specifically, Texas, rural South, and kind of the impoverished areas that inhabit that area of Texas, and then just the fact that it's basically all of these townspeople, versus the banks, and I think Chris Pine turns in a phenomenal performance. It's the best I've ever seen him, and Ben Foster, of course, is, he's in perfect form. I mean, he's always great in everything that he's in. Jeff Bridges, of course, plays a great role as the marshal who's on the chase. The heist scenes are compelling, and he also blends humor in very well, I think, in his script. I've read the script multiple times. I've seen this film 4 or 5 times, and I can't see it enough. I think it has infinite rewatchability for me, anyway. I know that you didn't care for it too much, but I think that Sheridan's second feature, it was incredible, and he got he got recognized for it, and I think that it was deserved.
Yeah, I mean, didn't really resonate with me, didn't hit me as hard as it hit you, but still great writing. Chris Pine is amazing in it. Jeff Bridges is amazing in it. Yeah, that's a solid number 5.
All right, man. What's yours?
All right, so top 5 territory for me. It's really hard to order these. I honestly hold them all in equal regard. Some of these movies I've seen millions upon millions of times. Others I've only been able to see a handful. Yeah, so all of these pretty much can be considered number 1 picks in my opinion. But what I have written down in my number 5 spot is Blade Runner 2049 by Denis Villeneuve. This is honestly one of the best movies I've ever seen in my entire life, and I'm so glad I was able to see it in IMAX twice, because it's absolutely enthralling and visceral. It's a great tribute to the science fiction genre, and it's a great addition to the Blade Runner story. I was pretty on the fence about this movie when I first heard about it. I wasn't sure if a Blade Runner sequel was really necessary, but once Denis' name was attached to it, I had more faith, and as soon as I started casting Ryan Gosling, Jared Leto, and Ana de Armas, Harrison Ford reprising his role as Deckard, I had a lot of faith going into this movie that it'd live up to the name. And it did. It honestly did. The film captivated me within the first 5 minutes, honestly, with its glamorous shots of post-apocalyptic Los Angeles, and that thrilling score with the blaring synths, just thunderous drums. It was an amazing cinematic experience from start to finish, like I said. I can't remember the last time I felt such excitement during a film. From the opening tracking shot to the of the protein farm to the first battle where he fights Batista's character, you're sucked in right away. Gosling, Ford, Leto, Wright, de Armas, like I said, the entire cast is perfect, nailing every detail and nuance of their conflicted and scared characters. But for me, it's honestly Gosling that stands out as, the shining beacon in this movie. Officer K is probably the most real character that I've ever seen in a science fiction movie, especially as one as grandiose as Blade Runner, and that really blew me away. He nails that dichotomy of playing a soulless replicant, but also portraying this special being that is so close to human he can practically consider himself one. K's story is a shining beacon in this grim setting of 2049's Los Angeles, and it's realized and developed and paced in such a natural and raw way. Denis is not trying to replicate the original, which is great. He's just making a new story entirely.
Yeah, I can't. There's not a whole lot, much more than I can add to what you've already said, except that, of course, Roger Deakins being behind the camera. I knew that Denis and him have teamed up twice before, and they've always been at the top of their game when they are together, and I look forward to what they do in the future. I hope they do team up. They continue to team up on future films, but they, I think, cranked out their best work here with 2049. I agree with you. And mad props to everyone in the production team because the production design is flawless. It's
The production
absolutely incredible.
design, the sound mixing, the cinematography crew, the lighting crew, the costume department, every aspect of this film feels calculated, precise, and most importantly to me, honest. It feels like they gave a real honest effort into this movie and crafting this universe, crafting this story, creating these characters and bringing it to life. The last bit about my review on Letterboxd, I wrote, "It's stunningly gorgeous, unforgivably emotive, and just an absolute joy to watch." And I couldn't recommend this movie enough.
It's absolutely incredible, and I think going back to what you said, that you have to see it in IMAX. It's the only way to experience it. I was also lucky enough to see it twice in IMAX, and I actually should have seen it more because you may not get an experience like that again. It's easily the best cinematic experience I've ever had. But I'm saying this all too early because this is higher up on my list. So, but
Yeah, I
that's
think it's your
interesting.
number one. If I had to bet
It
on
is.
it.
It is my number one if we're gonna spoil it. But you having it at number 5 does surprise me a little bit, though. I have to admit.
Yeah, like I said, my top five are honestly all number ones. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. But going back to that, that kind of um, thought process. Whiplash could easily be in my top 5.
oh yeah,
It was very difficult for me to keep it out, but just Hell or High Water sneaked in there above it just because I think it's more my avenue. I mean, I absolutely love Whiplash, but I think a heist thriller such as that kind of just edged it out slightly. But my number 4 to continue on here is Mulholland Drive, and I'm not sure if you've seen it yet. I know I've been bugging you about it to go see
I
it.
haven't. I haven't seen it yet.
But David Lynch is one of those directors who is undeniably, he's one of the most uh, out there, eccentric. He's definitely, he can be off-putting to some people, but there's no denying his talent. I really feel that Mulholland Drive is his masterpiece. I think it kind of weirds some people out just with his style, but it's all very surreal. It's dreamlike. It incorporates mystery, and then there's a twist that you could never possibly see coming. I won't give away too much because I know you haven't seen it. Naomi Watts turns in, I think, her best performance ever. That's definitely the best I've ever seen her. Everybody plays such a weird role in the dreamlike state that she's in throughout the entirety of the film. But essentially, her character, she's an aspiring actress who, of course, moves out to LA to try to further her career, and it just turns into something you just never see coming. It's just, I guess, her idealized view of what she thought it was going to be like, and, it just completely turns on its head. I absolutely love this film. It blew me away. It was another one of those films I went in with little to no expectations, and there was no possible way I could ever have any expectations about it because of what it turns out to be. And I'm very interested to hear your opinion on it if you do watch it.
I'll have to see it pretty soon. I've only heard good things about it.
Yeah, and I couldn't even begin to describe to you. It's just something you got to see for yourself.
So, my number four is Manchester by the Sea, Kenneth Lonergan's honest and grim story about love, loss, and coping with all that. Um, so my review, I started off with death. It sure is taxes, some would say, but the circumstances behind death is anything but concrete, and how some people cope with death varies as much as the tides. Manchester by the Sea gives us a glimpse at this variable and circumstantial coping through the stories of Lee and Patrick Chandler, and the relationship the two foster after the tragic and early passing of Patrick's father, who is also Lee's brother. This movie is one of the two movies I've left the theater feeling like I haven't actually seen a movie, more so just the real life telling of a story unfolding before your very eyes. Kenneth Lonergan's ability to write is highlighted immensely in this picture. I won't say too much because you've already talked about it, but this movie is absolutely gripping, and from start to finish, you're laughing, you're crying, you're on the verge of tears. Sometimes, these people give really honest performances, and it's great.
Yeah, and kind of to go back to what you said about leaving the theater having basically not seen a movie, um, I completely and totally agree with that. I think it's some of the most realistic dialogue ever realized on film. I've never seen anything like it before. I think a lot of attempts at realistic dialogue still kind of come off as scripted, but that I'm with you. I feel like I was really with, Casey Affleck and Lucas Hedges' character throughout the whole film. It was a true and honest and genuine look at grief and coping in, you know, what is it, on the East Coast, Manchester by the Sea.
Yeah,
That's
New
like
England.
New
Yeah.
England, yeah. Yeah, I think it captures the, kind of the lifestyle and the, kind of the way of life over there. But yeah, I completely agree with you. It's essentially a masterpiece. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, I agree.
So my number 3, and now these two films were tied at number 1 for me before Blade Runner 2049. I guess we're just going to get that out there as we already know. But these two films were tied for first before that. They're really interchangeable for me because one of them is essentially my favorite film, and then the other one was the best film I'd ever seen until Blade Runner came in and combined the two. But so my number 3 is Ex Machina. For me,
Nice.
it's the
Nice.
most. It was a perfect sci-fi film to me. I went in again with little to no expectations. I hadn't even heard of it. Alicia Vikander turns in a wonderful performance. I think she got snubbed out of that performance. I think she ended up winning for like the Danish Girl or something like that. But I really
Yeah.
think, even though I haven't seen that film, I can't really have an opinion. I still think her performance
She's
here,
great in both.
she absolutely nailed this. Being an artificial intelligence who wants to be essentially a real person. But Dom Hall Gleason, he kind of has to carry the film as this sort of programmer who's really unsure of what he's getting into. And he meets Oscar Isaac, who's like basically the head of Google. I mean, if we're being real, but he goes to his very luxurious house that's also like a scientific lab, and he does the Turing test with Ava, performed by Alicia Vikander, and I think it's one of the tightest scripts I've ever seen. It's perfect. There's no screen time ever wasted throughout. It's got a little bit of mystery, thriller thrown in there on top of the sci-fi elements, which are strong, and it's intelligent. I was really compelled. I was gripped throughout its entirety. I love this film. I can't say enough about it. I think basically everything about it is near perfect, if not perfect.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I have to watch it again.
Yeah, that's another one, man, that I can rewatch at any time. I could probably watch it once a day, every day for a week straight. I wouldn't get tired of it.
So my number 3 is No Country for Old Men, also by the Coen Brothers.
Yeah, you and
This
your Coen
movie
brothers.
is absolutely perfect in every sense of the word. It's a great take on Southern Gothic and neo-westerns, which I've come to appreciate more and more. And so, from the dialogue, the story, the villain that is Anton Chigurh, portrayed by Javier Bardem, the ambiguity of all this conflict and all this happening in the movie, it really sucks you in and kind of leaves you on the edge of your seat. And so, from the very surface, you only see this as a neo-Gothic Western crime thriller, but beneath all that, it's much more. The movie tells the tale of these three souls destined to meet each other along an obscure and violent path, and along the way, lives are lost, money is found, morals are questioned, and beliefs laid to rest. And not only is the story perfect, but the Coens weave together this visceral drama and violence with morally confounding events. So you're really left wondering what is actually good and what is actually bad, and what is right and what is wrong in this movie, which is really, really fascinating for me. Um, yeah, from beginning to end of the film, those what many can only hope to achieve, I think, have you at the edge of your seat for the entire runtime.
No, I agree with you. I was absolutely blown away by this movie the first time I watched it. I was lucky enough to watch it on a home theater screen. It completely blew me away, and it's like you're saying, it is essentially a masterpiece. I think it's the Coens' masterpiece. I don't think they've ever put together anything more impeccable than No Country for Old Men. Anton Chigurh turns in a terrifying, chilling performance, and it's his best. Of course, Roger Deakins is behind the camera again. That's another film that you and I love, where Roger Deakins is the cinematographer. Yeah, I love No Country also. It's definitely on my list. It's just a lot of other films I think are ahead of it just because I enjoyed the other ones a lot more. That it's a very dark, and in the ending at first put me off to it, but on rewatches I've liked it a lot more and more. So speaking of Roger Deakins, by the way, my number 2 is Sicario. So you had mentioned Sicario in your honorable mentions. Sicario is my number 2 film because it's in every way I think it's a masterpiece. When you break it down, directing, acting, cinematography, score, everything about it to me is flawless. Especially with the mystery of Benicio del Toro's character of Alejandro. You really don't know, because you're literally thrown in with Emily Blunt's character of Kate Macer. You don't know what's going on, and neither does she. And that really plays into it, because she's trying to figure out what Benicio's character is, and he's not giving her anything. The same thing with Josh Brolin's character, which I think he's phenomenal in that role as well. He's this kind of snarky but very grim and serious, special operative, and I think it perfectly captures this conflict that we have with, the Mexican border and the drug cartels. I was enthralled from start to finish. Roger Deakins' cinematography is mind-blowing, it starts out as a crime thriller, and it turns into something that you do not expect at all. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, and what point in the film it turns into that kind of a film. And then it leaves you with the ending that it really hasn't ended, and I think it captures the drug war perfectly in that regard. So I absolutely love this film. I can't say enough about it, and I'm going to shut up about it, because if I don't, I'll keep going on. So why don't you give us your number 2?
My number 2 is Greta Gerwig's directorial debut, Lady Bird.
Ah, yes.
So yeah, this movie was absolutely stunning for me. I know it didn't resonate as much with you. You still enjoyed it, but you didn't love it as much as I do. But this is honestly one of the best movies I've ever seen. Certainly tied for the best movie I've seen in 2017, tied with Blade Runner. But this is the other movie that I left the theater having not felt as if I had watched a movie. And, it's a slippery slope, coming-of-age movies. It can get too campy, cheesy, too sad.
Sure.
But this movie walks that fine line perfectly, juggling comedy and drama and all these other elements such as love and conflict and self-doubt. And this movie is so warm, inviting, nostalgic, and raw. It was like I wasn't even watching a movie, honestly, like I said. And from the opening shot, you understand that Greta really wanted this film to envelop its audience. The warm, glistening sun over the Sacramento plains, the glowing neon from that small town suburb that she lives in. It's all so familiar, yet you want to explore it endlessly. The dialogue and pacing is all executed to perfection, with moments playing out organically. The characters are all a joy to watch, especially the dynamic between Saoirse Ronan's Lady Bird and Laurie Metcalf's, who plays the mother of Lady Bird. And so, all those relationships that are founded in this movie are so pure and satisfying. The relationship, like I said, with the mom and the daughter is great, but also Lady Bird and her dad. It's really great to see that refreshing take, because the relationship between Lady Bird and her mom is so unpredictable and can be really volatile at times, but her dad and her get along so well, and it's great to see that two sides, which is very real. It's how a lot of people grow up. The cinematography was also a highlight for me. The grainy appearance of the film at times is really nostalgic, brings you back. The bright pastels and washed out warm colors contrasted with the faded grip grays and navies of the school uniforms reminded me of something you might see in like a Wes Anderson film. The handheld camera shots made some moments really, really personal. And I think Sacramento is just a great place and a great setting for this movie. But honestly, I could go on, and I'll just end it there because, there's so much to say.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I did like Lady Bird. I enjoyed it. Hats off to Greta Gerwig. I think her directorial debut was it's as close to a coming-of-age masterpiece as I think you can get. And I think she did a great job with the writing. Like you were saying, very realistic dialogue. Saoirse Ronan turns in a great performance, and so does Laurie Metcalf. I mean, their interplay was infectious, and it was very powerful when there were emotional moments. And I think it captured a mother-daughter relationship perfectly. It just, like you were saying, it didn't really resonate with me as much. Maybe I need to see it again. But I did enjoy it. That's not to diminish the value of this film, because it is
Absolutely
phenomenal, and I think it's one of the best, if not the best, coming-of-age story in recent memory. One I compare it to is The Edge of 17, which I think...
that's a great one.
I happen to enjoy that one more, but I think Lady Bird was more realistic, because, not that The Edge of 17 was Hollywoodized. It really... It's not that it was, but it feels more Hollywood than Lady Bird does, because Lady Bird is a lot more genuine, especially with it being an indie film.
Yeah.
But I very much enjoyed it, and for it almost made my top 10 list, and that says a lot, because that's not normally my cup of tea.
Yeah, I think The Edge of 17 definitely is a super strong coming-of-age movie. But I think it does fall into that like Hollywood trope, like you said, where it kind of plays out really predictably and not as organically as Lady Bird. I still love The Edge of 17. And it's interesting, after Lady Bird released, a lot of people were like praising it because, it's the first time we've seen a coming-of-age movie focused on a mom and her daughter.
Right.
But The Edge of 17
we literally just saw that
2 years ago or last year or something like that.
Yeah. But it's like you were saying.
Both are great movies.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think it's more grounded and more realistic. Lady Bird is, but The Edge of 17 is still a great film. Now, going into my number one, I feel like, we've already said this and we've gone into it so much, but really can't say enough about Blade Runner 2049. It is the greatest film.
Goat Runner, Bet Runner.
Yes. In Denis Villeneuve again. He's in my top 10 3 times, and he could be there more. I would say, but again, Blade Runner 2049 is not only the best film I've ever seen. It's the greatest cinematic experience I've ever had in a theater. Let alone IMAX. It just, everything about it blew me away. You could go on and on. I mean, the acting, directing, cinematography, sound design, score, sound mixing, production design, costume design, really down to the most minute details. It is the best movie I've ever seen in my life. I don't think I'll ever be able to replicate, no pun intended, that kind of an experience in IMAX ever again. I was absolutely blown away by it. I saw it twice in IMAX. I wish I'd seen it more. I really can't say enough about this film. I think it's very intelligent, meditative sci-fi that also combines mystery, noir aspects, as well as it's actually, I think it far surpasses the original in my opinion, because there's deeper characterization in the character of Kay. There's actually detective work done. There's hardly any detective work done in the original Blade Runner, I would argue, just because, I mean, there's that enhanced scene with, Deckard, where he's, trying to find that picture, that he's on that very old computer or whatever. But really, he's just retiring replicants in the first film, and then in Blade Runner 2049, that's obviously initially what Kay does, but you later find out that it actually turns into more of a mystery, crime noir, and I think the script is as close to perfect as you can possibly get. The actors all turn in phenomenal performances, each and every one of them, from Ryan Gosling to Harrison Ford, which Harrison Ford surprised me greatly. I mean, I've always thought that Harrison Ford is Harrison Ford in every Harrison Ford film. He actually gave a shit in this performance. He actually showed emotion, and he delivered the lines actually differently than he normally does. Just Anna de Arma, like you were saying, I think she did a great job. Jared Leto, I think a lot of people were put off by Jared Leto's performance. I was not. I thought he was a compelling villain. He wasn't on screen very long, but he did a great job in every scene that he was in. Robin Wright, Sylvia Hope, she was a terrifying villain. I thought she was incredible as Love in that film. She's kind of on the chase with Kay throughout the whole film. And, man, this is another one I could go on and on about, but we've already raved about it enough. I think everybody gets the idea, but maybe not everyone would love this film, but it's at the very least it's worth watching. I think sci-fi fans and cinephiles will love this. Beyond that, it'd be hard to encapsulate every audience, but it is far and away the greatest film I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well put. Well put. So
Alright,
my number one.
I know what
is
your number one is.
Technically, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, but
It's
I'd
the
honestly
trilogy,
have to,
isn't it?
yeah, throw in the trilogy. All films I hold in equal regard. But I just wanted to keep in my top 10 a single film
Sure.
from each series. Yeah, I don't know. This movie is just so rewatchable for me. I've read the books countless times. I am in love with every single character. This film is really about the triumph and the heart behind humanity and good. And while it gets kind of campy in some films, I think Peter Jackson really expertly laid this out in the span of those three films. Yeah, I don't know really what to say besides that this is probably the best trilogy I've ever seen. Certainly one of the best fantasy movie series I've ever had the pleasure of watching. If you haven't seen it for some reason, you should sit down, devote a day to watching all three of the extended editions. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I think The Two Towers is universally praised as being the best of the trilogy. Some might argue Return of the King. I can't have an opinion on that, and I know you hate me for this, but I fell asleep during Return of the King, and I never finished it. I'll have to revisit it, but I do agree that the Two Towers, that is the best, at least from what I've seen. Although Fellowship is great in its own right. It is a phenomenal trilogy, but to me, my favorite trilogy has to be the Dark Knight trilogy, and I know that's kind of a generic and basic answer. I think most people would probably say that, but just when I think Batman Begins is a phenomenal story. The Dark Knight is obviously a modern classic, absolutely carried by Heath Ledger's performance. The Dark Knight Rises, I think, gets a lot of flack for it having to follow up The Dark Knight, and a lot of people were disappointed by it. I, for one, I loved it. I know you love it as well, but I think Dark Knight Rises is a great cap to that trilogy. It really it's a great send-off for Christian Bale as Batman. I know, like I said, it's kind of a generic answer to say that a superhero trilogy would be my favorite, and of course a Christopher Nolan. A lot of people like to praise Nolan and to a fault, but I think Christopher Nolan is also one of the greatest filmmakers of our time. I know a lot of people say that he's overrated maybe, but I would completely disagree with that. I think he's one of the best that we have, and every project he turns out, I know I'm going to be there the first day. I did that for Dunkirk. I missed out on Interstellar in the theater. I wish I hadn't, but Interstellar is phenomenal, and each time I see it, you kind of pick up something new. Maybe if you remove the whole love conquers all thing, that was kind of cheesy, but it's still, I think, at the very least worth watching, and and then you go back to The Dark Knight Rises and Inception, The Dark Knight, The Prestige, Batman Begins, Memento, Insomnia. Chris Nolan's got quite the catalog when you break it down, and every film is great, if not fantastic. And yeah, I know you feel the same way, because we've talked a lot about Nolan in the past, and we will only continue to do so.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, I know that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is near and dear to your heart. Clearly, it's your number one. But man, I gotta hand it to the Dark Knight trilogy, for me anyway.
Yeah, both are absolutely excellent.
There's some good trilogies out there. There's some crap ones too. You talk about the Matrix trilogy. You start out with a modern sci-fi masterpiece, and then it's all downhill from there. It just goes into an action-driven and kind of overly philosophical, to a fault, mess after that. And then the obvious Jesus metaphor, I guess, to cap it off. It's like, really, man? The Wachowski sisters, I think they were brothers at the time, but
yeah,
they really could have had something there, but it just really kind of devolved into a mess.
So that was our top 10 of all time.
Yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but yes, that's the Mammy and Gammy top 10. So when we review films in the future, and be sure to let us know what you would like us to review, but we have plenty that I know that we can and will do, and we're going to be watching new ones and reviewing those. I really haven't been out to see much lately. I know you said you saw Darkest Hour and you loved it.
Oh yeah.
I need to see that soon, but if I had to say, I would say the first one you and I are going to review for sure is going to be Annihilation in late February.
Oh yeah.
Alex Garland's follow-up to Ex Machina. You guys now know how much I love that film. And I'm pretty excited about that one. Natalie Portman is in the lead role, and based on the novel of the same name, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
The trailer made me excited for it, and I'm also a little bit skeptical, because I really hope it doesn't just devolve into a monster film, because that's kind of what it was made to look like. I'm not really sure about it. I'm really hoping he sticks with the, intelligent sci-fi route.
Yeah.
But I guess only time will tell on that one. I don't know if anything else is coming out soon. Do you know?
No idea.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Still have some from last year that I have to see.
Yeah.
3 Billboards. What else is there?
Yeah, you do. Billboards at the very least is worth watching.
Call Me By Your Name.
Yeah.
Ingrid Goes West. Detroit.
Yes, please see Ingrid Goes West. I'd like to know your opinion on that film as well. I very much enjoyed it. It was very close to making my top 10 of last year. But definitely do see Billboards for McDormand and Rockwell's performances alone. But yeah, to me it was a little bit of a disappointment, just because you can come to expect Martin McDonagh to turn out a dark comedy masterpiece, basically, between In Bruges and Seven Psychopaths. Here, it just didn't work. But the dramatic moments have a lot of impact, and I think he does a great job, more so on the dramatic side than on the comedic side. But again, it's very worth watching. It's a great story, deserves to be told, and I think it's told in a great way. But so I was a little bit disappointed by it, but still, you got to see it.
Yeah, I will.
I know it's not a glowing recommendation, but hey, it's something, right?
For sure.
Yeah, I do know there's some on your list I got to see as well. But Florida Project, what are some of the others?
Darkest Hour.
Darkest Hour, yeah. So you guys will have to join us next time. What do you want to do next time? You want to do top 10 from last year? Do you want to do...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think that's what we should do. I think we, for the most part, have the same movie taste. It's just there's one or two here and there. Well, we'll disagree. We don't always have the same, but
yeah.
Generally speaking, we like the same shit.
Dude, your list sucked.
Fuck you. Your list sucked.
You right. You right. None of us had the Emoji Movie, you fucking retard.
We still haven't seen the Emoji Movie, and we still haven't seen fucking, what's it called? Office Christmas Party.